My name is Frank Joseph. I was born January 17th, 1940 in Chicago Lying-in Hospital at 59th in the Midway. And I've been here. I I stayed here until June of 1954 when my family moved me to Park Forest against my will. If I'd had a say in the matter, I would have said something, but I was 14 years old and I really didn't. So with that brief introduction, I wrote this novel called To Love Mercy. I hope some of you have read it. For those of you who have not read it, the Hyde Park Historical Society will have copies available, which I will sign before I leave. And
Yeah,
let's see.
I'm watching an interview with Frank Joseph.
Oh, who's speaking out there? Hi there. Okay, well, I am going to start out by taking questions. And if nobody comes up with a question in a few minutes, I will start some other way. Let me start by asking you a question. Has somebody out there read this novel already? Okay, let me tell you about the novel. And this is what authors call the elevator pitch. It's about blacks and whites, Christians and Jews, how children view the world, conflict and forgiveness, and Chicago in 1948. I was born in January 1940, as I said, and in 1948, I was 8 years old. And for those of you who have a long memory, you'll remember that Hyde Park was a prosperous, secluded, relatively secluded, extensively Jewish, but I didn't consider it a Jewish neighborhood at the time, but others may. I am Jewish. My family belonged to Sinai Temple, Chicago Sinai Temple, which was an extraordinarily liberal assimilationist congregation located at 54th and the Lake. And all that figures into the construction of this novel because I now live in the Washington, D.C. area. I left Chicago in 1969 at age 29 to take a job at National Journal as a reporter because I was a journalist at that time. And I've been in Chicago from my graduation at Northwestern in 1962 for the next 5 years, first at the Old City News Bureau of Chicago, and then for 3 very formative, very important years of my life at the Associated Press Chicago Bureau. Excuse me, does somebody have a drink? Oh, perfect. Because I've been kind of rushing here, I'm going to take some water and possibly drink while I talk. Thank you. So I wasn't a journalism major in college at Northwestern. I was a creative writing major. And when I was 21 years old, my ambition was to sit in the garret and starve and write novels. When I was 22 years old and graduated from college, my ambition was to put breakfast on the table and push the starvation agenda to the back burner. So I'd done journalism as a kid and I enjoyed it, but I didn't really think I was going to do it, but I wound up doing it. And I don't regret a minute of the time that I spent in journalism, which was quite half of my career I spent as a working journalist. And I was a very lucky guy. I was I'm sorry, did somebody have something they were going to say? Okay, I'm sorry. I thought I heard somebody interrupting. I was really lucky. I was in the right place at the right time for so many things. I covered the riots in Chicago. They sent me to Detroit and I covered the Detroit riot. I covered the Democratic National Convention disorders in 1968. I was on the street the whole time. And then when I went to Washington, I was at the Washington Post eventually during the Watergate years, which was another bit of luck. So I've had a lot of experience, and during all that period, I didn't write any fiction, but there wasn't a day when I didn't think about it. And then at a point in my mid to late 50s, I decided, you know, if not now, when? And I started writing short stories. And the first short story I wrote was a story I called Dora on the Bus. And it features a Black woman who's about 63 years old or so, and she's got about a second grade education in Sunflower, and she comes from Sunflower, Mississippi, as part of the Black diaspora into Chicago. Thank you. And she's a housekeeper in a house very much like the house that I grew up in. And she's talking to herself. She's thinking as she waits for the bus. And she's thinking about the woman of the house. And that woman is modeled on my mom. And what she's thinking is her own thoughts about my mom. And I think I'll just read you some of that, because that short story became a chapter in this novel. This is from chapter 6, Dora on the Bus. These children, their mama lets them be too free. This is her having her thoughts while she's waiting to come to our house. These children, their mama lets them be too free. How's she expect me to raise them right when she don't give me no support? Bus coming. No, it ain't mine. Number 4 goes up Cottage Grove. I'll be out here waiting another 10, 15 minutes in the rain. Oh, Lord, my hip does hurt. It's so cold at 6 o'clock in the morning. Don't matter, it's June. My boy, Joseph. Lord, wonder how he's doing. How are you, sister? Oh, fine, fine. Yes, I'm going to work too, if the good Lord lets me get there. I feel it more each day. Alive these 57 years, maybe 58, ain't sure. Standing out here in the cold wet every morning, of course I'm going to feel it. Mama had the rheumatism too, passed while I was a young gal. These children, that boy Steve, he minds pretty good, but that girl Beth, she gives me trouble. Her mama is the problem. I know that. Ain't I raised 3 sets of white folks' children already? This mama, she don't like me. I can tell it easy. Oh yes, she acts like there ain't nothing wrong between us, like I ain't colored or something. Shoot, she's got eyes, don't she? She comes up to me, says, Dora, when you make the beds, could you please make them with hospital corners? She says it like that, hospital. Here, I'll show you what I mean, she says. Then she lifts up the sheet and the cover like I'm some child. She's showing her how to put on her drawers for the first time. Here, Dora, first you lift these sheets up, then you tuck this one under, then you fold the top part over and tuck it in tight like this. After you get done, the end of the bed will look like this. She's so proud, she's grinning across her face. I've been making beds that way when she was still a little baby, a long time before I ever seen no hospital. But I don't say nothing. I ain't saying she's bad. She just don't respect me, and she's trying to pretend ain't nothing wrong. That don't work. Folks, they know how other folks feel. Can't hide it, you know. Can't no one, really. That's an introduction to this novel. There was a real Dora. Her name was Dora I name her Dora Barfield in the book, but her name was Dora Winfield. And I hadn't thought of her for 40 years. When I sat down to write, I was just looking at a blank screen, not knowing what the heck I was going to write. And Dora Winfield came down from heaven and started talking inside my head. And she was talking about my mom. and I would just started writing it down. And that's kind of what you just heard me read. So this is something about the process that a writer goes through. And something about Chicago, and something about the history of Chicago, and something about the history of Hyde Park, because as I say, this was a prosperous neighborhood, and a lot of people had help in their homes, and the help was all Black. Because there were a tremendous number of Blacks in Chicago coming up from the South. And a lot of them were like people like Dora with little or no education, coming to the promised land. And it was literally, Chicago was literally sold as the promised land. There were articles in the Defender, which was a national newspaper in a sense, because it circulated throughout the South. And it had stories, the Defender carried stories kind of almost literally saying, come to Chicago, the streets are paved in gold. And Black people in Alabama and Mississippi, the streets were not paved for them in gold, they were paved in mud. And slavery had, had been ended officially 60 years ago, but for many of them, they might as well still be in slavery. And here was the Defender, and their friends were reading it to them saying, wow, Chicago, you can get work in the stockyards, you can get work in the steel mills, you can get a job, you can get a life, your kids can get an education. They've got schools where white people and Black people are in the same classes together. Let's go to Chicago. And so they would get on the train, the Illinois Central, the city of New Orleans, the old city of New Orleans. There's a famous song about that. I can't listen to that song without tearing up. I'm serious, literally. I cannot listen to that song without, I can't even talk about that song without tearing up. And they would get on that train and stand up all night in what amounted to steerage. The cars were segregated. They had to stand there cheek by jowl, sick and well, mothers with babies. And in the next car, the white people were, probably eating crab cakes and off of linen tablecloths. Many of them, that's how most of them got here, at least particularly from Mississippi, which was right along the Illinois Central stop, and Tennessee, and maybe Alabama. So there were several waves of Black migration to Chicago, mostly in the 30s and 40s, and by the time the second wave had gotten here, they were all pretty much forced to live in Bronzeville. Now, for those of you who don't know where Bronzeville is the name of a neighborhood that used to be called Bronzeville, and I believe it still is, around 35th and State, centered, kind of going from 29th and Prairie to Cermak Road, 43rd Street, something like that. But it was rigidly segregated from about Halsted Street, if I'm not mistaken, to, no, I am mistaken. Actually, it probably went, well, it was someplace like a Halsted Street to the lake. But it was about 3 miles long and about 1.5 miles wide at the widest. And in that neighborhood were crammed hundreds of thousands of people, 9 people in a 2-bedroom apartment, in a 2-room apartment, and worse. The apartments were heated with coal, so everything was smoky and poisonous atmosphere. And that neighborhood's 30 blocks from Hyde Park. And that was where the help came from. That was where Dora Winfield lived. She lived at 29th and Prairie, which she pronounced Prairie. I'm sorry, I don't want to lose my train here. This was the Chicago of my growing up. I grew up in this Chicago where the only Black people we knew were the people who came into our homes to help us. Probably wasn't true for other people, some other people, but it was true in my case. And Dora came into our lives when I was 6, and she was in our lives sometime into my teens. And she was kind of like a second mom. my mom was kind of a free range parent for her day. She was a wonderful mom in her way, and I loved her to pieces, and she loved me to pieces too. But she left a lot of the parenting part she wasn't crazy about. So when my sister Judy and I would come home from school, likely as not, Dora was the person waiting with the milk and cookies. And she was actually Dora was a very intelligent woman. It wasn't, we didn't know that when we hired her, but I think we came to know that. And if my mom didn't appreciate it, I certainly did. She was, full of what they call mother wit and country wisdom, but she was a very intelligent, perceptive woman. And she had great country sayings like, some people don't use their heads for nothing but a hat rack. Or when I couldn't find something, she said, there it is, child, if it was a snake, it would have bit you. So uh, this is the woman who kind of, raised us when my mom was off doing whatever my mom was doing. And she figures largely in this novel because she is the glue between the white and the black societies. The white society, we have a kid named Steve, who's an awful lot like me, a white Jewish boy, 10 years old when the book starts, 11 years old, 10 years old, and a black boy named Jesse Owens Trimble, but his nickname is Sass because he has a smart mouth. And I'm going to tell you this is how these boys meet. The novel starts at a White Sox game in the old stadium, then known as Comiskey Park. And it goes into extra innings. And they come out late, and the car's in a dark parking lot, and it's all the way at the back, and all the other cars have left. And the family, the father, the grandfather, and Steve, the son, are walking across the cinders in the parking lot toward the car when a bunch of little black kids come out of the darkness, and they're 10 years old kids. They couldn't really hurt them, but they start dancing around and asking for money. And well, I'll just read you some of that. Then I get back, and there are Dad and Grandpa all alone. Everyone else has gone home. Well, a colored guy with a push broom. Dad says, did you fall in? I say, huh? And he says, skip it. Let's just get a move on. By the time we drop your grandpa off and be 1 o'clock, your mom will kill us. I couldn't help it, though. So we're walking along 35th Street, and there's nobody out here either. All I can hear is our shoes. They've got their hands in their pockets and their heads down. Dad's saying, pick it up, Pop. Dad calls Grandpa Pop, not Dad, but I call Dad Dad. I guess I could call him Pop, but I never have. Grandpa says, we'll be all right. There's attendance. But when we get to the parking lot, there aren't any. Just 1 or 2 cars left. The Buick is all the way on the far side, over where it's the most dark. I run ahead and swing around the lamp pole, but Dad says, cut it out. I say, why? He says, you're making me nervous. But there's no one else out here. He says, that's why. I don't get it. Grandpa says, you don't know. The Schochers. I still don't get it. The Schochers, the Schwarzes. Now I get it, maybe. Sometimes Grandpa talks those words. I don't know them, but they're bad words. Or maybe they're not bad, but you have to say them in Yiddish, not English. I don't know if that makes them bad, but it might. I heard Grandpa say one of them before, not the other. I never heard the other. They probably both mean the same. I think I know what the one means. Schwarze. Negroes? He says, yeah, Negroes, except he says it like Negroes. What do they teach you in school anyway? I don't feel so good. My stomach hurts. Maybe it's just I've got to pee. I should have gone after Siri ruined the Appling card, but I didn't because of how late. I'm sleepy too, even though I stay up this late sometimes reading comics by the hall light, and they don't know it unless they catch me, but I stuff the comics under the bed when I hear them coming, so they don't catch me very often. I'm going to be real sleepy at school tomorrow. Mom almost didn't let me come to the game because of school, and she wouldn't have, except it's Tuesday, and school's out Friday for summer. And I haven't seen a White Sox game yet this year. And maybe it's because it's my birthday Saturday. I'll be 10. Maybe that's why she let me. Then out come those kids. I don't even know where they come from. There wasn't anyone else in the parking lot but us. That's what I thought anyway. Maybe they were hiding behind the Buick, maybe. There's about 8 of them, 7 or 8. I can't tell because it's so dark over there by the fence. But the thing is, they're kids like me. The oldest might be 12. The girls are as young as me, 5th grade. One of them anyway, and the boys, 6th grade, except the tall one might be in 7th. Tall one says, "God dime," only it sounds like "God dime" because he's colored. They're all colored. They're all colored at Grandpa's theater too, the Calumet. I guess everyone down here is colored. There aren't any colored on the White Sox, though. The Indians just signed Larry Doby, but Dad says there won't be any colored on the White Sox ever, not with Chuck Comiskey running it. The tall kid says, "God dime" again, and he's smiling, kind of. His face is pushed close to Dad's. He's about the same size as Dad, but skinny. Dad could take him easy. He's real skinny, even though he's tall, and besides, he's just a kid. He doesn't seem scared, though. In fact, now he's laughing. It's Dad looks scared. The kids are dancing around us now, singing, "God dime, God dime, God dime," and asking for ice cream. One of them puts his arms and scoots out, arms out, puts out his arms and scoots around us like going, "Ah," like an airplane. Another one starts singing "Cement Mixer Putty Putty" like they sing it on the radio. "Cement Mixer Putty Putty." He sounds like Dora. They all sound like Dora. Dad shouts, "Go away," and reaches into his pocket. He's got a lot of coins and the keys to the car. He reaches out to the tall kid, but then the kid playing airplane bumps into him by accident, and he drops all of it, the money and the car keys. The kids start laughing and shouting, "Money, money, money," and scrambling around in the dirt. The girls too. Then this one kid, he grabs for Grandpa's coat. Little bitty kid. This kid says, "Take me back to Comiskey Park, old man. Buy me some cotton candy." He starts to dance. He jiggles up and down, then he reaches for Grandpa's hand. "Hey, old man, you want to dance? Let's you and me dance," he says. I'm standing next to Grandpa, so this kid's standing right in front of me. He's got on a checked shirt. His face is thin, almost like a girl's. I look at him and he looks back right in the eye because he's only a little taller, even though he's probably a year older, probably 6th grade. He's got big eyes, or maybe it's just he's skinny, they look so big. "Let my grandpa alone." "Ah, I'm just playing with him, hee hee." But then I see something, corner of my eye. It's the tall kid. I turn around and he's sneaking up behind Grandpa. He's crouching down like nobody could see him, but I see him. He's sticking his hand under Grandpa's jacket. The little kid sees him too. He starts yelling at the tall one. He calls him Nubby. "Get the hell away, Nubby. We didn't come out here to pick no pockets. You're going to get us all arrested, you damn fool." He's using cuss words too, the little kid. Worse ones than hell and damn. So what happens next? I've been trying to figure it out exactly, but there's some parts I just can't tell because it was so confusing and dark too. First, Grandpa turns around fast. He must have felt the tall kid reaching into his pocket, or maybe he figured it out from the little kid cussing. Little kid is still holding on to his jacket. I guess he just doesn't have time to let go. I'm standing right next to Grandpa and he bumps into me, the little kid, and I slip. It's real easy to slip because that parking lot is just gravel and cinders. I fling my arm out for balance and it hits him right in the throat. He goes, "Oh," because I hit him pretty hard, real hard. But it was an accident. Then I don't know, I'm slipping in the gravel. I hear other people slipping and shouting, and someone goes, "Whoop." It's Grandpa. Dad's yelling, "Steve, Pop, are you okay?" He's helping Grandpa and me up. The other kids, all of a sudden, they're gone, disappeared, except the little one. He's lying on the ground where Grandpa just got up from. His nose is all squished over to one side of his face. He's bleeding too, and his left hand is twisted up underneath him, but his nose, jeez. He's out cold. Dad says to call an ambulance, but there aren't any payphones. Grandpa says, let's just get in the car. I'm looking at the kid lying on the ground and I can't tell if he's breathing or not. Maybe you can't breathe when your nose is all pushed over like that. He isn't moving at all. Don't leave him lying there, please. You're shivering, Dad says. What's the matter, Steve? You want my jacket? Then he looks down at the kid. Grandpa looks at the kid too. They look at each other. Finally, Grandpa shrugs. Dad says, we're going to have to take him over to Mercy. Come on, Pop, give me a hand. Dad gets down on his hands and knees and pushes the gravel around till his keys clink. He gets up, brushes off his pants. He hands me the keys. Steve, open the door, he says. He grabs the kid under the shoulders and Grandpa picks him up by the knees. They lug him into the front seat and prop him up and then shut the door quick so he won't fall over. I hope I'm giving you a taste of the kind of thing that could happen. What I read you did not happen, but the grandpa was based on my own grandfather, Nathan Joseph. The movie theater that I refer to briefly was the movie theater called the States Theater at 3507 South State Street that he owned and operated for 50 years. And my grandpa, Nate, as I call him in the novel, never missed an opportunity to see a White Sox game, and neither did my dad. And my grandpa didn't hesitate to take an afternoon off and go with me and my dad over to see a White Sox game where they'd stuff me full of cotton candy and hot dogs and stuff, and they'd watch the baseball game, and I don't know what I was doing. I was just enjoying being with them. And those are, warm, happy memories of my childhood. But he would walk over from the theater and my dad would, drive down because we lived in Hyde Park. We lived in Madison Park. We lived at 1356 East Madison Park. I'll digress for a second. For those of you who know Hyde Park well and know Madison Park, it is a beautiful little enclave between Dorchester, Woodlawn, 51st, Hyde Park Boulevard, and 50th Street. And my dear old friend, Judy Thornburg, who is sitting in the audience here, the scant audience, was so wonderful as to drive us through Madison Park yesterday and all around Hyde Park and up 63rd Street and down Michigan Avenue and over through all these nostalgia-producing places. And we just had a wonderful, exhausting day, spent the whole day together. And I will say about Judy and me that we share a mind and we share a history. And, I would say and she would basically almost complete my sentences. So she was absolutely the right person to start my Chicago trip with. But getting back to this story, which I'm going to digress again and say, what I wanted to do here, in writing this novel, it came clear to me eventually, was to tell the story of Hyde Park and Chicago over 5.5 days in June of 1958. Start it with the White Sox, end it with the White Sox, because there was just a sort of a bookending poetic justice to that, and just feel my way. The scene I just read you, the kid they take to Mercy Hospital is the black kid, Sass. And I won't read you this because I'll be standing up here reading the whole novel to you if I do, but I'll just summarize what happens. The next day in school, Steve cannot get this episode out of his mind. He has never in his young life experienced anything remotely like this. And he sleepwalks through the school day. And when the bell rings at 3 o'clock, he just kind of stumbles out in a trance, goes over to Lake Park Avenue, gets the streetcar, gets the streetcar, tells the conductor, he wants to get to Mercy Hospital, and the conductor tells him get off at Cermak Road and walk east, and he does, and he just sort of follows his nose to Mercy Hospital, which again, I'll digress. Back then, blacks went to Mercy. Blacks went to Mercy, Jews went to Michael Reese, and I don't know where everybody else went. But that was the way it was. Mercy was run by Catholic nuns. It was a excellent hospital. They served the community in which they found themselves, whereas Michael Reese served a different community. But Michael Reese was a huge hospital, a teaching hospital, and it served everybody. But I think emergency cases and stuff like that, and the run of cases who were hospitalized in that neighborhood, they went to Mercy. I say this not out of certain knowledge, but I know that that's where Dora Winfield went. So Steve finds Mercy Hospital, goes in, not knowing what he's looking for. A nun runs into him, and by great good fortune, he is guided to the bedside of this unconscious black kid, Jesse Owens Trimble. And he just waits there. And the kid opens his eyes. And I think actually I will read a little bit now. Now, this is the black kid, Sass. I am now speaking in his voice. So imagine that this old white guy you're listening to is actually an 11-year-old black kid from Bronzeville, and it's June 1948. I fall asleep then. Have me a dream about Papa. Papa is coming out of his church with Sister Amelia and fat old Sister Ruth, one on each arm. These here gals are angels, he says. They've come down from heaven whilst I was preaching my sermon, and they whispered in my ear about you, boy. They say you are trying the Lord's patience with your evil ways. Yes, sinful child, Ruth says, the Lord sent us here to punish you for picking on them white folks. Then Ruth and Amelia turn red like the devil. They breathe fire on me. I'm crying and bawling. Papa's praying over me like he does when he's trying to cure some old lady's arthritis. But he don't tell Ruth and Amelia to stop. No, no. He keeps on yelling and preaching and signifying, yes, sisters, purify this child, drive the devil out of him, make him whole and clean in Jesus' name. Then Amelia pulls out this big old bit brace out of her purse, just like the ones the carpenters use, and she starts drilling away at the right side of my head, screaming, come out, evil thoughts, come out of this child's head, come out, come out. She's shouting right into my ear, and that drill is going right into my brain. My head feels about to explode. I wake up, my head still feels like it's about to explode, and a white boy is sitting by my bed. Must be the kid from the parking lot. I just stare at him. Boy is 9 or 10, I judge. Younger than me, a year maybe. Just a plain old white kid. Got straight brown hair, kind of small for his age. Looks like he don't spend too much time outdoors. Kid wants to say something to me, but he don't say nothing at first. Just sits there twisting his hands in his lap. Then he asks, am I hurt? Of course I'm hurt. Head's pounding like it's got a streetcar running through it. What's this white boy care to know that for? I ain't nothing to him except trouble, maybe. He says he was afraid I died. Look at this stranger white boy, talking like he's my mom and my papa, and my mom and papa ain't even showed up yet. I don't want to talk to this kid, so I don't say nothing, just stare at him. Kid gets nervous, can't keep himself still. I'm sorry I hurt you, he says. That's it. I can't keep quiet now. Ask him what he's talking about. Says he hit me in the throat, but he didn't mean to. So it's true. I can't believe this kid, him no bigger than one of them gals. How'd you do it? Says I was standing in his way. Says he really wasn't trying to hurt me. Says he just got scared. Says it was an accident. What happened after that? You were unconscious. We brought you here. Bring a colored kid to the hospital? Tell him the hospital folks must have been laughing when he walked in. White kid looks at me like you don't understand what I'm saying. Asks me my name. Sass. Is that your real name? Real enough. What's it to you? That shuts him up for a minute. Wants to know where I go to school. Tell him Raymond Elementary. Asks what grade? 6th grade. Why are you asking me all these questions? Boy says he don't know. He's got a sad look on his face. For a moment, I think about asking him where he goes to school too. But this is all so crazy, it don't make a lick of sense. First, we try to get these white folks to give us money. Then the white folks carry me to the hospital. Then this white boy shows up talking like he's trying to be my friend. I ain't got no white friends. Only white folks I ever talk to are in stores, unless you count that policewoman. What do you want from me? I ask him. I don't know that either, he says, and he starts to cry. Because I'm imagining the situation, and I'm imagining I'm 10 again, and I'm imagining that such a thing is happening to me, which it never did, by the way. This I made that all up, made it all up. That's what we do, us writers, make them all up, except the parts we don't. And he's and at that moment, I decide Steve breaks down in tears because honestly, he doesn't know why he's there. All he knows is something momentous, colossal, life-changing has happened, and he wants to understand it. And the rest of the book really is about how they come to that understanding. I'll just sort of take you on a tour quickly. So it turns out that Grandpa has accused the white kid of picking his pocket. And it's true. This kid, Nubby, who turns out to be Sass's older brother, was trying to pick his pocket and half succeeded, but didn't quite succeed. And but they're over at Grandpa's house one night, and he starts saying, "Where is that wonderful silver talisman that my own great-grandfather made for me back in the old country?" And they search through the couch cushions and they can't find it. And Grandpa says, it was that black kid. He picked the one who picked my pocket. He got it. I'll throw that kid in jail. And so that's when Steve decides he has to go back down to Bronzeville and find this kid again. So it comes out that the kid's mom, Maddie, is the cashier at the white grandfather's theater. See, all these lives are starting to come together in interesting ways, which they did back then. That part is as true a fact as anything. So Maddie is the cashier in the movie theater owned by Nate. And Nate is the guy who is going to throw Nubby, the Sass's older brother, in jail for picking his pocket and stealing this precious one-of-a-kind silver talisman. And Steve realizes he has to go back down there and find Sass, which is about as hopeless a task as the first task, finding him the first time. But I guess he thinks he did it once, so he can do it again. So his dad takes him down to his grandpa's theater, and he's around there waiting. And remember, his mom, Sass's mom, is the cashier. And lo and behold, he shows up, possibly by a little bit of coincidence. And Steve says, "You got to come with me. We got to find it, or they're going to throw you in jail." And Sass at first doesn't believe him, just like he didn't believe him the first time, but Steve manages to convince him. And so they go off on this crazy odyssey, which takes up their whole pretty much rest of the novel. They get on a bus and it crosses the line into the white neighborhood. It crosses Wentworth Avenue. And Sass says, "Are we on a bus? Did we just cross Wentworth Avenue?" And Steve says, "Yeah." And he says, "I can't go here. I'm black." And he says, and so Steve has no idea what he's talking about. And so Sass explains it briefly. If he's caught in Canaryville or Bridgeport and, white kids see him, they'll beat the daylights out of him. So they stay on the bus And eventually they make their way down to the old Maxwell Street Market, more Chicago history. And I'm sure everybody watching me and everybody here in this room is familiar with it. It was a flea market run by immigrant Jews almost entirely. And it happened every Sunday because the Jewish Sabbath is on Saturday, and so Jews could work on Sunday. And the stretch of Maxwell Street from a little south of Roosevelt Road to about 14th Street was just a street fair every day. And there's a scene I love on Maxwell Street where Steve sees this White Sox jacket in a store window, and he goes in and tries it on, and he has to have it. And it costs $10, and he happens to have $10 because his grandma gave him $10 for his birthday. And Sass says, "You're crazy." And somehow or other, it comes out that the proprietor of the store learns that Steve is Jewish and starts asking him questions that Steve can't answer because he doesn't know enough about his religion to answer these questions. And the guy gets abusive and starts accusing him of, what kind of a Jew are you? There's a lot about religion in this novel, because although I'm not a religious person, I never have been, I'm not now, I am fascinated by the role religion plays in society, and particularly in these novels. The first two, because this is a trilogy, and I'll get to that later on, deal extensively with religion, and particularly the intersection of Judaism and Christianity, and for better and for worse. So this is where Steve gets his first taste of somebody calling him out for not being a good enough Jew. And I'm chuckling, but it isn't funny. It wasn't funny. It wasn't funny to Steve because he is totally confused by this. And then they go get hot dogs, and that's a great scene. And that's the scene I always read when I'm just reading from the novel, and I don't know whether I'll read it today, but it's a fun scene. Yes. 5 minutes left. I'll never finish this in 5 minutes. And then questions, I hope. Okay, good. All right. Long story short, they wind up in Riverview. Anybody here know the word Riverview? Anybody here? Anybody out there? Riverview? Riverview was a huge amusement park. It went an entire city mile. It's a square mile from Belmont and Western to whatever is a mile from there. It had terrifying, terribly unsafe, dangerous rides, and people who would steal your money from you. And it was wonderful. First time I went to Riverview, I was 11 years old, and it was a life-changing experience. I loved every minute of it, partly because it was so terrifying. Because you saw people there you would never see in Hyde Park. Kids with, packs of cigarettes rolled up in white T-shirts. Kids not much older than you. So anyway, terrible things happen at Riverview, and culminating in Sass winding up in the dunk tank. And the dunk tank was something where they had Black people sitting on swings above a pool of water, and people would throw baseballs at them, and if they hit the target, it would release the swing and they would drop into the water. And this is historical fact. This happened a lot. And the Black kids who were well trained in this, and they made good money doing this too. This was a good job for a Black person if he didn't mind the humiliation. He would start out from his swing by yelling taunts at the audience, who were all white, as you might expect, and saying they were stupid and dumb and couldn't hit the broadside of a barn. And then they'd throw the ball, and the guy would go splash into the water, and he'd come up bubbling and laughing and doing this kind of a minstrel act, saying, "Well, you dunked this old coon, I guess." And I know this sounds awful. I know it does, but I'm just telling you like it was. I didn't see this, but this has been well reported. This is thoroughly documented. So Sass, because they're out of money and they can't get home, The guy promises him, and the guy's regular kid hasn't shown up for, to sit in the dunk tank. He offers Sass $5 to sit in the dunk tank, which is, enough to get them home, and a princely sum, really, in 1948. So he gets dunked, and Steve throws the ball. And Steve has another midlife crisis. And they get on the elevated in total silence. And Steve tries to talk. Sass won't talk to him. And finally they talk, and they have this big argument on the elevated in the subway saying, how could you do that? And Steve doesn't have a good answer. He doesn't know, because there's so much he doesn't know. So they get back to the theater, and they're going to make one last chance to find the silver talisman that's still missing. Remember the silver talisman? And they break into the theater. Sass's mom has the keys. They sneak in. He knows where the keys are. He grabs the keys. They go back down to the theater. They open the locks. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. They're in Nate's. They open the door to Nate's office. They're rummaging around for it, and the night watchman shows up. And the night watchman is named Joseph, and he's crazy. And so there's a lot of things that are associated with that. And he shows up late in the novel, and the night watchman is Dora's long lost son. But I don't actually, this is kind of a spoiler alert, because I don't actually come out and say that. I let the reader guess. And at the end, Dora, they show up, he trots the kids over across the street to the storefront church, which is Sass's father's church. And all the parents are there, and they're arguing with each other, and Dora's there. And they have a moment where there's a spark of recognition between them, and they embrace, and then they separate. And Joseph's last word is, "Give me one more hug, old woman." I'm choking up my own stuff. The parents argue, the boys go away, they escape, they wind up at the lakefront, they watch the sun come up over the lake, and they come to terms with what they've learned over a long 5.5 days and nights. And they end the novel a little older and a little wiser. And I'll take questions. Questions, anybody?
Can you tell us a little bit about so like as a white person writing this novel, right?
Yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit more about like how you thought about race, or how you thought about like what language to use in?
Sure, absolutely. Wonderful question. The question is, as a white person writing a novel in Black voices as well as white voices, there are 4 first-person voices here, and one of them, Steve's, is the voice, of me as a kid, but the other 3 are Black. Dora, a 60-something-year-old uneducated Black woman from rural Mississippi, Sass, an 11-year-old Black kid, and Joseph, Dora's long lost son, who neither of them ever really fully realize they are mother and son. And trying to think what the right answer to your question is. There are many answers to this question. I started out writing this novel, and I wrote the first couple of chapters at a white heat. And then I sort of stopped, and I kind of came to, I sort of felt like I was at a cliff staring down into an abyss, because the first part had been easy because I was writing the Jewish part. And I realized it's time to write the Black part, and I don't know how. So here's what I did. I live in the Washington, D.C. area. I arranged a trip to Chicago, a 2-week trip. I spent half of it in the archives at the Chicago History Museum, where I found wonderful materials, including an oral history, which I quote from extensively in an extensive afterword in this novel. And And I found about a half a dozen people who, we have a guest. I found about a half a dozen people. Hello, welcome. Oh, Bunny Moy, my goodness gracious sakes alive. Look at this. Folks, meet Bunny Moy. How are you doing, man? Great to see you.
Haven't changed.
Nor have you. Okay, sorry about that. Bunny Moy. Oh my God. Wow. Good to see you. Well, yeah. Yeah. So where the heck? Oh yeah, I know. I arranged this trip, and by great good fortune, I found about a half a dozen people Black people who'd grown up in Bronzeville in the 40s and 50s. And I wound up interviewing them. And these interviews aren't exactly the kind of research you think of when you're doing a master's paper, because I'm asking them factual questions. What was it like? What was it, what was it like to live in Bronzeville? What was the community like? And I got great answers on that. And I'll just tell you quickly what some of them came down to was, we felt comfortable here. We felt uncomfortable there. When we lived in this neighborhood, it didn't seem like an overcrowded, it didn't seem like what it was, which is an overcrowded, sometimes dangerous, sometimes unhealthy, place with terrible schools and, so forth and so on, no city services and coal heated apartments. We felt warm, safe, comfortable. Our neighbors kept their doors open. Everybody's mama looked out for everybody else's kids. The only time we ever felt uncomfortable was when we would go downtown to the store, to Marshall Fields or, the Stevens Company or something like that, where most everybody was white. And that was when we felt uncomfortable. And that was a revelation to me, because look how naive I was. That was a revelation to me. But a writer does something else, or anyway, this writer does something else when he's conducting interviews like this. He's not only asking factual questions and listening for factual answers,
What was this?
but he's also sort of trying to let the person seep in through his pores, and kind of get a sense of the way the person talks and the intonation and words that they use and gestures that they might use and something like that, because he is anticipating that he's going to be writing in a voice like this. And so part of the reason he's doing this is to steal that person's persona and voice and better prepare himself for the job of inhabiting such a person. And that's what writers do. I mean, that's what we do. We're like actors, except we play every part. We have to, we have to be the director and the actor, and we have to play every part. And so I took it upon myself to play some politically very incorrect parts, which was to speak in the voices of Black people. And I did it in 3 novels. And, I expect there's going to come a point, if I ever achieve any prominence, that the gates of hell are going to crash down on me, and somebody's going to ask me the terrible question, which I consider the "how dare you" question, which is a very common question these days. How dare you appropriate my culture? How dare you presume to think you could know what I've been through? How dare you this? How dare you that? And it's all true. I couldn't and I can't, but I can imagine it. And that's my job. And the other part of it is, it's my story too. It's not the same story, but your story was a big part of my story. And it's a truth that I want to tell and share with the world in a nice way. Because another thing we writers is entertainers. If we're nothing else, we're entertainers. First and foremost, we're entertainers. We're just people doing tap dances. Because if we don't catch your interest and keep it, you are not going to keep reading. And if you don't keep reading, it doesn't matter what the hell we write. So I'm a firm believer in this, in what I'm telling you all right now. I want to be as true to the history of it as I possibly can. And believe me, I was exhaustive about the history. And I don't think there's anything of material importance in any of these three novels that is ahistorical. I'm willing to stake my reputation on it. I did a lot of research, and I'm pretty sure everything I asserted that can be checked historically was right, and that all the other stuff was as emotionally true as I could make it. So that's a long answer to a short question. Other questions? Anybody out there? More questions?
Hi, Frank, it's Ann Honig calling.
Hi, Ann, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Well, you see me. I am as I am.
Yeah, I know who you are. I have a question. I don't
And
mean to-
Honig, before we get any further, Ann Schlesky Honig was a grade behind me at Kenwood School. And she was in, I think, my sister's grade. Go on, Ann, sorry.
Now you had to tell them my age. I have a question, and I don't mean to be rude, but who is your target audience for this? I'm fascinated to watch you reminisce, even just telling your story about your book, because I lived the same thing, and I can see how exciting it is for you. But I don't know how exciting it is for anybody else.
Well, a couple of answers to that one, too. This novel was published in 2006 by Mid-Atlantic Highlands. At that time, Amazon, you could put a review on Amazon, and it wasn't as difficult then as it has become. And there are 29 29 reviews up on Amazon from all kinds of people, and they aren't all my friends. Some of them are, but not a lot of them are people I don't know. And they average five stars. And somebody just today, after many, many years of not, some stranger named Michelle posted a 5-star review and said what a wonderful novel it was. And she too had grown up in Hyde Park and stuff. So there's some answers hiding in some answers to your question hiding there. Some of them are just people like us, people who are interested in the history of Chicago and the history of Hyde Park and lived this, people who think deeply and with concern about the place of religion in society, people who think deeply and extensively about kids and how they view the world, which really, and sometimes I think that's what these books are really about, is kids and coming of age and how kids view the world.
Hey, Frank,
Yeah.
this is Lisa in Washington. I think we live
Hi,
about.
Lisa, you're the one the 29th reviewer. So pleased to
No,
meet
no,
you.
I'm not the reviewer. I'm the one who lives close to you. I live in Northwest DC.
That one, right? The other
Okay.
one.
So let me just ask you quickly, because
Sure.
I'll get together with you when I'm back and you're back.
Yep.
But I want to know, because I'm writing a memoir about Hyde Park.
Yep.
I want to know, in what way was your experience as a kid in Hyde Park impactful on you when you were a child, but throughout your life?
Throughout my life. The short answer is throughout my life. I wouldn't have started writing. I didn't know this was the novel I was going to write. I didn't know I was going to start with Dora and it'd be a short story. I didn't know any of that. The way it started was kind of similar with the Dora story. I had no intention of making the Dora story part of this novel. I was just sitting there wanting to write a novel, sitting in the dark, looking at the screen, not knowing what was going on. And I somehow or other, I guess I started thinking about those White Sox games and how we went down there. And, my dad would take in, my grandpa's theater was right, 3507 South State, where no white people lived, but many of the merchants were white. And I think a lot of them were Jewish too. I tried to do some research on this and I wasn't able to actually nail it down, but I think that was the case. It was the case with my grandfather. And my grandfather was very comfortable with Black people. Unlike the grandfather in the novel, who's a little darker than my actual grandfather was, he was quite comfortable with them. He worked with them every day. they respected him, he respected them, he treated them pretty well, or as well as could be expected. The theater was a shit box, if you'll pardon my saying so. Bare wooden seats, terrible things went on down there. I remember my dad would tell me a story about there was a Hopalong Cassidy Western on the movie, and Hoppy was in trouble. So some guy in the audience pulls out his gun and says, "Here, Hoppy, I'll help you," and shoots 5 holes in the screen. So it was that kind of place. And when I was doing this research, I tried to find the ads for the State Theater in the Sun-Times and the Tribune, and I couldn't find them. And I thought, this is crazy. You know, they were in business down there. And it came to me. They didn't have to advertise. They had a marquee, and they played a double feature every day, Randolph Scott Westerns and old B-movie, you know, detective stories and stuff, nothing first run. And it changed every day. And if you felt like, you know, taking a load off for a couple of hours and had a quarter in your pocket, you went in and sat down and watched the movie, watched the double feature. So my dad, of course, would come down to the theater often, and we would come down from here, right here, Hyde Park, and we would get close to Bronzeville, and my dad would say, "Lock the doors." And I remember being 6 years old and hearing this and not knowing what he was talking about, but knowing that there was some kind of danger. And later on, you know, he was to tell me stories about people entering cars by pulling open an unlocked door and sticking them up, Black people doing this to white people. And I don't know. I don't know if it happened to him. I really don't. I have no idea whether it happened to him, and I have no idea how necessary it was to lock the doors, particularly in light of what all the Black people who lived there and grew up there told me. But you know what it is, perception. And I say this, and I want to defend my dad, who was actually, for the time, a very liberal, progressive guy who believed in brotherhood and tolerance, which were the words of the day. And even after a while, had membership in the NAACP. When he was helping my grandpa run the theater, he had membership in the NAACP, I think probably because he felt it was an important thing to do for business purposes, but nevertheless, he was a member of the NAACP. And we were taught brotherhood and, you know, racial tolerance and stuff. And I think to get back to the question, which I'm straying from, the reason I wanted to write about these novels is because I had all these ideals when I was a kid. And they were, you know, I'd go to Sinai Temple and hear Dr. Mann, you know, talking about the same things. And then, you know, I'd sort of see real life in the house, and here's Dora, and she's in, you know, a servant position. And there's no Black people living where we are. And there's one Black girl in our in our class in Kenwood, Rosetta Harris. And she's, you know, she's pretty much there the whole way through school, but she's the only one ever at the time I graduated. And there was one Latin family, Mexican family named Martinez. And apart from them, I don't remember anybody else who wasn't white, mostly Jewish. And this was Kenwood School, a public school at 49th and Kenwood. The building still stands there, although it's now the Miriam Cantor Middle School. And I think it was probably a pretty good school, as public schools go. And I mean, I don't know at what level these questions were brewing in me as a kid, but later on, I became a reporter and I was covering riots, and I was covering Black people wrecking their neighborhoods on the South and West sides, violent riots, people dying, people shooting at each other, you know, and they weren't race riots in the sense that they were Black against white. They were really what, you know, have been described as property riots. They were Black against neighborhood, because the conditions under which people had to live out in North Lawndale and terribly benighted neighborhoods like that were atrocious. They were, I mean, they were unacceptable. And when the people rioted, they were rising up against that as much as anything else. And I was out there on the street for a lot of these things. So I was thinking about that. But I was seeing behavior during these riots that I could not understand. And especially on the first night, people would be out there, you know, doing these things, and they'd be laughing and they'd be having a great time of their lives. And you know, they were sort of wrecking everything. And I was thinking, as a practical matter, where are you going to get breakfast in the morning? You just wreck the store that you know, that you buy breakfast at. And, you know, they'd smash the windows and, you know, steal stuff. And the merchants would figure it out for a while, and they'd put Soul Brother up in the store, whether or not it was true, actually, sometimes. And it, you know, and it didn't always help. Things got darker as the riots went on. The second night thing, you know, people weren't laughing so much. But I saw this behavior and I could not understand it. And it was, by this time, it was 1967. And my girlfriend at the time was very radical. And she was filling me full of ideas. And I was covering this stuff for the AP. And I covered a thing called I forget what it was called, but it was a conference of white radicals where I heard a lot of this. And I just made the decision I had to leave journalism and go back to school and get a PhD and study the riots for the rest of my life and come up with answers to this. So I got in at age 27, I got into the University of Chicago political sociology program, PhD program somehow, I don't know how. And I came to the U of C bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, thinking I had knowledge to share. I had something that people in the political sociology department at the University of Chicago might want to know. And boy, was I wrong. At the University of Chicago, if it didn't happen in a book, it didn't happen. And
did you have Morris Janowitz at all in that
I
department?
did not have Morris Janowitz, but he was in the department. I had David Greenstone. I had
babysat for David.
Yeah, it's late David Greenstone, a lovely guy. He got me in. David Greenstone was a friend of Mike Barkin's, and Mike said, "David, this is a nice guy," and I think that's how I got into the U of C. But I was a square peg in a round hole. I had no business in academia, and it took 2 really painful, clinically depressed years to come to the realization that the best thing I learned in graduate school was that I should never have left journalism. And so by that time I was writing my master's paper on the riots. And so I came to Washington to do research, and I was in Washington for 3 weeks. And I went into the National Archives for 3 weeks, where I saw the Kerner Commission documents. I was the first outsider ever to see the Kerner Commission documents, which were unsealed a week before I got to Washington. And at night, you know, I was going to parties with my journalistic and congressional pals and having a wonderful time. And I come back home and I say, Washington is where I am going to go. Because by that time, in 1969, after the Democratic National Convention disorders, Chicago had turned into a police state in so many words. It was a terrible, terrible time in Chicago. And the capping experience was for me and my next girlfriend, Carol, who's the woman I'm now married to, were in my Volkswagen Bug going through Washington Park, and we got stopped by a cop. And he was very rude to us, and he gave me a ticket. And for no reason, you know, he told me I was doing something I wasn't doing and gave me a moving violation for doing it, and drove away laughing. We'll fix those hippies. And at that moment I said, I am out of here and I am never coming back. I am never setting foot in Chicago again. It lasted about 1.5 years. But when I left Chicago, I was done with Chicago. But what I've discovered in the intervening years is you can take the boy out of Chicago, but you cannot take the Chicago out of the boy. And with that, unless there are further questions, I will rest my case.
For a wrap up, I do actually have one, like, would be a good closing question.
Yes, ma'am.
So you named, like, the books are called, like, To Do Justice.
Thank you. The right question at the right moment.
Yeah, could you explain why that?
Okay. This novel is the 3rd novel in the Chicago Trilogy. It's called To Do Justice. The 3 novels are To Love Mercy, To Walk Humbly, and To Do Justice. All the titles come from the book of Micah, chapter 6, verse 8. What doth the Lord require of thee? to do justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with thy God. After I wrote this novel, it did pretty well, actually, considering it was published by a virtually invisible publishing company. It was so small. And to answer Ange Lindsay's question, it really was, who's this novel for? I had a lot of trouble figuring out that question. Who is this novel for? Is it old people like me? Is it young people? Well, what happened was it turned out to be both. It's not a young adult novel, but it is about kids. That's a problem for a for a publisher. It's serious fiction about serious topics, but about, some time in the past that nobody cares about. And I'm thinking, how am I going to do this? So I start, lining up appearances and coming to Chicago. I made 7 trips to Chicago over 2.5 years. And I made about over 100 appearances. I appeared at public libraries. I appeared at Chicago Sinai Temple, where I had a crowd of about 90 people. That was a very successful appearance. I appeared at the Salzer Library, where I think I had 1 person in the audience. I appeared at a bookstore in DeKalb, where I had no persons in the audience until my friends showed up. The life of an artist is not an easy one. But at one of those appearances at a Borders in Oak Park, a guy comes up to me named Joe McGee, and we start chatting. And Joe turns out to be a high official in Chicago Public Schools. And Joe loves the novel. He buys the novel, and he loves the novel. And we develop a relationship. And largely through his efforts, the novel has a huge second life in Chicago, in schools, particularly Chicago Public Schools, where I'm here to tell you that authors do not venture. Authors don't come to Chicago Public Schools. They stay away. I didn't stay away. I was educated in Chicago Public Schools. I appeared in some tough places. I appeared at Englewood, and that was a tough appearance. I appeared at Montefiore twice. And that was really a experience. But it went great. Actually, they asked me back to Montefiore because I was such a hit. If I say so myself, I didn't know what I was going to say. And I grew up thinking Montefiore was a reform school, which it wasn't. But I thought it was a reform school. Judy thought it was a reform school. Bunny thought it was a reform school. And we all thought it was a reform school because that was the reputation. And so I'm having this appearance, and I don't know what I could say to these kids. And I'm at the urinal. I'm in the men's room. I'm at the urinal, and I'm thinking about, what I was told. And, I said, I was told the kids who go to Montefiore are bad kids. And that was it. That was the key. And I go out and I stand before these kids and I say, "Are you bad kids?" And they all yell no. And I had them after that. I had them in my hand. It was a terrific appearance. And so I did a lot of that. And the novel did well, considering all the strikes against it. The other wonderful thing I had was Chicago Public Libraries. Again, a chance encounter with a woman named Marla Wolf, who was a librarian in the Chicago Public Libraries and a networker like none I have ever met. And Marla, made contact with other libraries, and it got shelved in CPL. And I had a lot of library appearances. And those 2 things helped this novel succeed. The first publication of this novel helped it succeed immensely. And another thing is that I was on Rick Cogan's show on WGN, and Rick loved this novel. He just loved it. And at that time, he had a morning show on Saturday mornings at 9 o'clock. And I was on the entire hour. And he, between commercials, he would ask me about the novel. And I had never done this before. It was actually Rick Cogan's appearance. The Rick Cogan appearance was almost the first thing I ever did. I didn't know what to do. And so I sent him a lengthy email saying, we should talk about this, we should talk about that. And Rick said, forget all that. You're just going to come in here, pretend we're sitting in a bar, and we're strangers sitting on bar stools together, and we start talking. That's what this is going to be. And that's what it was. And it was just so comfortable and great. And it was a great interview. And after that, for a brief shining moment, To Love Mercy hit 1,400 on Amazon. So it was pretty great. So it did okay. It didn't do badly. It sold 4,000 or 5,000 copies. And another great thing is that my publisher at the time, the first publisher, Patrick, who's also a Chicago boy, put me in touch with a literary agent named Michelle, who became my agent and said, write me 2 more and I'll sell them as the Chicago Trilogy. And so that was where that idea came from. So Patrick was after me to write this novel, but I said, I can't do that. There's a story in the middle, and I don't know what it is, but it's the teenager story. It's the high school novel. And that's what I did. I wrote the second one, to Walk Humbly, which takes place mostly in Hyde Park High, a lot in Hyde Park High School, the old Hyde Park High School at 62nd and Cottage, Stony Island. Not the new Kenwood Academy, but I don't actually even know how that building is used anymore. Judy and I drove. It's still a high school, is it? But it's not Hyde Park High. Hyde Park, it is. Judy and I drove past it yesterday. My mom went to Hyde Park High. My mom went to Kosminski. What that's worth. Is Kosminski still there? So To Walk Humbly, Stephen Sass part company into Love Mercy at the end, and they know they'll never see each other again because basically society won't let them. But lo and behold, they do re-encounter one another in high school, in Hyde Park High, in the men's room at Hyde Park High, because here's another little bit of interesting local history. Black people, Hyde Park High was the best high school on the South Side. It was one of the best high schools in Chicago, public high schools. And Black people didn't live in the district where they could go there. A lot of them didn't. They still lived in places like Bronzeville or even farther away. So they developed ruses to attend Hyde Park High. And such a ruse gets Sass, my character Sass, into Hyde Park High, where Steve goes into the bathroom and somebody's smoking in the stalls, as boys will do in boys' bathrooms in high school. And it turns out it's Sass. And he says, what are you doing here? What are you doing here? So a new uneasy relationship commences. And this one has a lot to do with religion, because Sass's father, you may have inferred, is the pastor of a storefront church. He also works in the steel mills in Gary, but you know, during his off hours, he runs a storefront church across the street from the movie theater. And a lot of the experience takes place because I neglected to mention that Dora's a member of that congregation. So in the second novel, it spans 5 years over the mid-50s, from 1952 to 1957. And then and only then, I got around to writing To Do Justice, which is based on my experience covering the riots and takes place in the summers of 1965 and 1966. And is the one novel of the 3 that really isn't a Hyde Park novel. It's a North Lawndale novel, if it's anything. And it's based on actual events that I covered too, lots of them. And it was just published a few weeks ago, and it is available right here from the Hyde Park Historical Society, but not actually, it's available from me. This book is available from the Hyde Park Historical Society. And because I showed up late and I felt terrible about it, when I was in the Uber, I said, I know, I'm going to give everybody in the audience a free copy of To Love Mercy. Well, right now I'm looking at 5 people in the audience, and some of them have already read it. As to the rest of you, I told the Historical Society, I don't know, I'm going to let the Historical Society take care of this. But if you, in your wisdom, decide to give free copies, so shall it be. And particularly if for 1995, you buy a copy of To Do Justice. But you don't have to do that either, because it's up on Amazon, where it's way less than 1995. But you'll get a signed copy from me with this beautiful cover. And my everlasting gratitude if you do that. How many other questions? How many questions did I answer and did I not answer?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for inviting me. Apologies again for getting the time wrong. I hope I didn't inconvenience you too badly. I hope you learned something about Hyde Park history and Chicago history. I could stand here forever and talk about this stuff. And they have my email. You can send me emails. You can call me on the phone. I'm going to be in Chicago through next Sunday. I'm actually meeting Ann Slensky, who's in the viewing audience, for breakfast or lunch or something. I forget what we're doing, but I know we're doing something. And Judy's here. I spent yesterday with her. Bunny's here. We're going to spend today with him. And it's been great. I haven't been to Chicago since
Brian.
COVID. Was that a
Brian,
question
it's
out there?
great to see you.
Huh?
Great to see you. This is Brian from the North Shore Maui, on the North Shore Maui.
Brian,
Yes,
my former
sir.
web guy.
I got my copy right
damn.
there.
Somebody
Yeah,
asked who my audience was?
There you go. There you go. I got my
Brian.
copy already.
Holy mackerel, man.
Yeah,
So you're
yeah,
still.
you had the rascal. It's great to see you. You're looking great.
Thank you. I wish I could say the same for you, but I can't see you.
Yeah, ugly. I break the camera.
Yeah. We will, we're just gonna let this peter out or?
Yeah, I
What?
was just gonna say, so you're leaving us some free books?
Oh, sure. Yeah,
Okay,
I
thank
will
you.
actually do that because
Okay.
I've got a lot more books than I want to carry back. So I'm
Okay.
actually gonna do that.
So, thank you everyone for joining, and we'll keep, some of the copies of Frank's book here. So if you wanna, pick up some free copies for, your patients, we, will have them at the next open house, which is gonna be on Sunday, June, 23rd.
Or if
from-
you are moved to make a donation
Yeah.
to the Historical Society in lieu of paying me for the book.
Yeah, you could also do that. That would be awesome. Thank you. And we will be open from 1 to 4 on Sunday, June 23rd. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining. And we hope to we will have this back up. Oh yeah, actually,
Will this be available afterwards?
yes,
Oh,
this will be available
People have-
afterwards.
people-
So okay.
Oh, wonderful.
Yep. All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you.